everyone's having a good time. But we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order and end the fun.
Second.
Council chambers, we're not supposed to be having that much fun here. All right, so we were called to order this city council workshop, AKA business meeting. Our first item of business here is the selection of chair. I don't know if Council President Ken Wentz trying to elbow me into it, left me sitting here, but
I nominate Councilman Moore to continue
all
as
right.
chair.
I figured once you sit here, there's no chance you're getting out of it.
No, you're not going to get away from it.
All right. Well, do we need to vote on that?
Since we got a motion and second.
Sure.
All right. Let's have a quick vote.
Yes.
Dr. Wu,
Yes.
not to put you on the spot.
Councilmember Myers?
Unequivocal yes.
All right.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
All right, great. Let's get on with the business. So we need to have a determination of public input. Anyone have any preferences there that they'd like to?
Can we do it item by item?
That's the way I'd like to do it.
Okay.
Is that agreeable with council?
Sounds
I'm not seeing any dissenting. I'm getting back in gear. Look out. All right, so we're going to do item by item there. We'll let the public speak at the beginning of each item if that works, after any introduction. All right, so let's move on into item 1. Here, that's 20-00653, regarding a proposed port lease, the Port Terrace project. I believe we have, I don't want to assume, but I see Port Director Amy Miller here, and assuming that you've probably got a lot of good information to give us.
Go ahead.
Okay,
I'm sorry, yeah.
thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of council. Our purpose here today, let me just give you some, kind of set the stage a little bit before we get into the nuts and bolts. As part of the streamlined lease process, we deviated from what has been council's policy on port lease negotiations and approvals, in as much as you all made it clear that you would like to have an opportunity to review leases and have public input on leases at least one additional time before they come to you for actual approval of the lease. Although your policy on port leases has not changed to date, we anticipate that it probably will at some point in the future. This is really our first opportunity to kind of test that process and see how all the timelines work out. So what we did, in spite of the fact that the policy really has not changed formally, is we scheduled to present to you at this workshop. Our objective is to take the information we gained today from you, from members of the public, to go back and formalize a final draft lease that then we will then bring back to you at your November city council meeting. That's the goal. We may meet that objective, we may not. It may slide to December. Who knows how this is going to play out. As I said, this is really our first opportunity to try to see how this process is going to work and how to streamline it best for the future. The other thing we went ahead and did is we went ahead and sent out the public notification. Typically, public notification is required for all property owners within 2,500 feet of either the main port gate or the project site, depending on whether the project is inside the port gates or at one. That notice referenced this meeting, the November 9th agenda conference, and the November 12th city council meeting as meetings that we anticipate city council might discuss this item. So with that, if you want me to go on into my PowerPoint, it's my pleasure to introduce to you what has been known up until last week only as Project Terrace because of state confidentiality requirements. Today, I can announce to you that it's the proposed development of an upper mid-scale hotel immediately south of the existing Holiday Inn Express in downtown Pensacola. The developer is the same developer that currently operates the Holiday Inn Express. Here to answer any questions as we move through this workshop process, in addition to myself, I have Justin Beck and Thomas McBoy with Beck Properties, who is the Port's commercial realtor. We have Mike Mangrum and his associate, who are here representing the Prospect, which is Siddiqui Investments. And I also want to make special mention of Rebecca Ferguson, who's the Port's Waterfront Development Projects Coordinator, who was the lead on the Port staff in negotiating this proposed lease. Next slide, please. As I said, this is our opportunity to workshop this, for you all to have input, for the public to have input before it comes back to council for a vote, hopefully in November. We're going to talk a little about how this fits into the Port's vision, plan, and strategy, and then we'll talk specifics about this particular project. I would like to say that the draft lease that you have in your package is truly that. It is a draft lease. It has not been reviewed by the city's legal team yet. It has not been reviewed by the Prospect's legal team yet. Our intent is for you all to have input in it so that we can go back and finalize the lease between now and your November meeting with the input we glean from you, with the comments from the city's legal team, and with the comments from the Prospect's legal team. We already know, for example, that there are some sections of this proposed lease that are going to require significant revisions between now and November, particularly Section 14, and in particular Sections 14.02 and 14.03, which deal with environmental issues. We know, as many of you do, that in the general area of those parking lots and the tract of land that we're talking about, there's a floating plume of petroleum contamination that dates back decades. We have the environmental reports on that. The Prospect is aware of that. What we know from our discussions with John Bondurant, with Cameron Cole, is that there's a specific process that the Prospect will have to undertake in construction of their facility. But there are no limitations on what can be constructed there. They simply have to monitor the site during construction. If they encounter any contamination, whether it's liquid, whether it's fumes, whether it's odors, whether it's whatever it is, they'll have to stop. They'll have to develop a plan to remediate it, and they'll have to remediate it before they can finish construction. Obviously, those kinds of considerations will be things that the Prospect will have to think about during their due diligence period to determine whether they can move forward with the project or not under those confines and constraints. Before we delve into a lot of the detail about the lease, I want to talk to you just a little bit about the Portside Pensacola Vision Plan. As you all will recall, about a year ago, we finished this plan, a little over a year ago, that had what I consider to be an unprecedented level of public and community input between responses, which are various forms of written comments other than survey responses, and written comments at actual meetings. And adding those survey responses and meeting comments together, we've had about 18,000 engagements, which I think is significant for a Port Vision Plan. What came out of that was a very large Port long-range plan book that has notional drawings of what various areas in and around the Port could look like. And what I wanted to point out to you are two particular slides. This one, which says that the port plan going forward should promote a mix of uses that includes spaces not only for residents, but for visitors and long-stay guests. Next slide. It also goes on to talk about Luna Basin, which is basically the Comandencia Slip area. And then one of the things it says about that is that it should, boy, that type's small, or I'm old, one or two. It should encourage urban infill development north of the ferry landing. So that's exactly what we're talking about here, is implementing what was called for in the Port Vision Plan in those areas. Accommodations and spaces for visitors to our community and urban infill north of the ferry landing. So Project Terrace is a portion of 750 Comandencia Street. This area outlined in red is 750 Comandencia Street. It is all of those surface parking lots. You will see about a third of the way down from where you see Cedar Street, there's a yellow line. That is roughly the southern border of this project. So the project will start just south of Cedar Street and go about a third of the way down. Basically, it will take up the top two parking lots of what is currently Comandencia Street parking. It's just shy of 2 acres, and of course, the final footprint will be determined after construction of the project. The project calls for a 120-key upper mid-level hotel, about 5,000 square feet of meeting space and associated parking. This is what you see before you is really a very early site plan and a rendering of what the site might look like. Obviously, the parking and the exact numbers will have to be determined based on the number of rooms, the square footage of meeting space, the average occupancy, all that is accounted for, and the prospect will have to include parking on their site that accommodates their need for this property, the need for their existing property, and that honors the existing commitments for parking on those two lots. Next slide, please. Thank you. That's the right one. So I wanted to brief you quickly on the key deal points. The use, as I've said, is hotel and ancillary uses, guest parking, pool, food and beverage, conference, convention, banquet, other types of hotel amenities. Anything other than that would have to have written consent from the city before it could occur there. The initial term of the lease is 30 years and proposes 4 additional 10-year renewals for a maximum possible lease term of 70 years. The tenant will have 210 days to conduct their due diligence. Again, that includes the environmental due diligence associated with that site. Once they've completed their due diligence and they've obtained construction permits, they'll have 24 months to obtain a certificate of occupancy and complete the project. Base rent and all other percentage rents become effective upon issuance of the CO. And I would like to point out that base rent and percentage rents, which I will review with you momentarily, are paid in full to the port. The tenant is not requesting any reductions, offsets, rebates, or subsidies from the city whatsoever. So for base rent, it starts at a base of $147,440 per year for the 84,506 square feet. Again, that'll be adjusted up or down based on the final total square footage of the project once it's built out. Rent escalates 7% every 5 years thereafter. So over the 30-year primary term of the lease, the total revenue to the port would be about just shy of $5.3 million in base rent. Next slide. That's the one. In addition to base rent, we've also negotiated what we call percentage rent. So the port would receive 5% of total room night revenue over $3.5 million with a maximum payment to the port on that of $250,000 annually, and non-room revenue of 2% of all other revenue on the property. And that's all other revenue regardless of whether it's operated by the tenant themselves or an authorized and approved subleasee or assignee or anyone else operating on the property. So for example, if they have valet parking and they hire a firm to manage their valet parking, the valet parking revenue is subject to 2% as well. So it's anything and everything that they earn money off of on the property, in addition to room. Based on the information we've received from the tenant, we could expect that to be somewhere in the neighborhood of another, between the two different types of percentage rent, another $100,000 a year or so in revenue to the port in addition to the base rent. And as I mentioned at the onset, the lease requires the tenant to not only provide the parking they need for this property within their leasehold or identify it elsewhere, but also for their existing property. And council may recall that those same parking lots are also used by a neighboring law firm. So those commitments would also have to be maintained as part of this lease agreement. You've received the draft lease, and you have in front of you the timeline that we hope we will be able to meet, and all the notices that went out. Again, this is your opportunity to tell us what you like, what you don't like, what you're concerned about, what you'd like to see us maybe look into more deeply in terms of lease terms and conditions, and to hear from the public. Between tonight and your November 9th agenda conference, we hope to corral all that and answer all those questions and incorporate all those comments into a final draft lease that we can bring you on the 9th and that you will hopefully take action on November 12th. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and if Mr. Mayor has any further comments.
You good?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Would council like to go through our discussions or hear from the public first? All right. Do we have any speakers from the public, Mr. Kerr? No? Okay. Well, that was easy. Oh, we do? Okay. Do we have cards out, or this is a new process, this monthly business meeting, so we don't have cards out? All right, we're going to do this old school. If you'll just raise your hand if you'd like to speak, name and address at the lectern as is standard, and yes, sir. You got it. You nailed it. You're doing it just right.
Jim Homiak. I need to give my address.
Yes, please.
Okay, 1700 Scenic Highway, Unit 400, Pensacola, Florida.
Thank you.
Member of City Council, I'm here today to address this proposed development and lease that's been presented to you guys by the port. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Jim Homiak, and I'm a co-owner of New World Landing, which is the property adjacent to the subject. My partners and I have owned this property since 2006. As a developer myself, I do support the redevelopment of our downtown, and one day expect to be in front of this board with a plan to redevelop our property. That said, there are three major areas so far that I'm aware of with this lease that I think this board should be concerned with. The first one is that this lease will take away 77 active public use parking spots that were dedicated over 15 years ago for the use by the public free of charge. This was an act between the city and the DIB, and this lot was one of four city-owned parking lots that were set aside for free public use. This lease will completely take away the public use of this lot and will greatly hinder our and other businesses in the area ability to conduct business. I would imagine all of you have parked in that lot before. It's basically the lot that is directly east of the New World building. And the rendering that she showed, I think, really has the line a little north. I think the property they're talking about comes all the way down and encumbers, if not all, but the majority of that 77 parking lot space. Those lots, those spaces will be completely taken away for public use with this lease. My second concern, and it's been addressed a little bit here today, but is the lack of transparency. You know, unlike the proposed developments that are in the works with maritime property that have been in the works now for months and months or over a year, I think we were notified just a few days ago. I never received the notification, but I was told about it just 14 days ago, and now we're trying to do a signed lease within the next 30 days or so. I'm sure the port will quote you some statute about regulations and why they have to do it that way, but it's kind of disheartening to think about all the other developers who've been working with the Maritime Park, particularly hoteliers, who've been working for 6 months to a year, and now all of a sudden they feel like there's a competitor down the street. Came out of nowhere. There also are several questions with the lease, and I'm glad to hear that we're going to be reviewing that lease because, you know, is the lease rate a fair value for the city? Is it market rate? Have we done an independent valuation on this site? What is it worth? We don't even know. There's also discussion, and it was talked about. There's not a lease payment that's paid until a CO is issued. Now, as a developer, I buy property and I develop land. I do subdivisions. Most of the time, before I start my work, I close on the land and I pay for it. This lease contemplates getting the whole building completed, and that's when the lease starts. So there are questions about the lease. I think they need to be addressed. But of greatest concern, and it was brought up here a little bit, is the proposed lease does not address it. It was discussed here today. The large-scale oil and gas spill that's below the property. This contamination has been defined in the area of the new development. And studies that were concluded in 2019 and 2020 have recommended active remediation take place. In simple terms, dig out the contaminated soils and remove the contaminated groundwater. There is contamination that's going to have to be removed. There is no other way to develop this property. This actually creates several other additional questions. Is it going to be the developer that's going to be responsible for cleaning up the site, or will the city take on the cost? Will the lease come back and be renegotiated after he gets in there and finds out just how much money it's going to cost him to do this work? And how will the developer even get bank financing on a contaminated site? This is extremely important to us as the owners of New World, because this contamination has been slowly moving in our direction. And the city is a responsible party. We are not. But when we go to develop our property, we're going to have a problem. And we're going to have a problem that was not caused by us. So we welcome anything that can happen that will eliminate this contamination, but we need to make sure that this lease addresses any and all contamination and how it's going to be handled. I think, in conclusion, there's just way too many unanswered questions at this point in time to even consider this lease, at this particular status.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me?
No, sir, I think you're good. Thank you. Do we have anyone else from the public, by a show of hand, who'd like to speak? All right. Ms. Canada Wynn, I see you're like.
Yes, I did have a couple of questions. One was on the environmental side. It was mentioned about the contamination underneath. So I need to know whether or not that contamination was going to be removed, or whether or not they're going to keep it the way it is and build above it, not aggravating it or messing with it. So I wanted to know that.
Yes, ma'am.
That's the first one.
Here, go ahead. Amy.
Okay.
Did I?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Madam President, we anticipate that, as I said earlier, the draft lease that you have in front of you is truly a draft lease. It includes a 210-day due diligence period. Our expectation is that during that 210-day due diligence period, we will work with the regulatory agencies and the prospect to determine, we have the intermediate assessment report that was issued in April of 2020. We'll provide that to the prospect. We'll work with the prospect and the regulatory agencies to discuss the prospect's development plan. Regulatory agencies, which is primarily DEP, will look at that development plan and determine whether it appropriately addresses the contamination, whether that's through maintaining the existing cap and building above it, whether that's total remediation. That's entirely up to the regulatory agency to weigh in on. But that'll be part of the 210-day due diligence period. At the end of the 210-day due diligence period, if the prospect determines that it's just not cost feasible for them to build the project based on those parameters, they have the ability to walk away and say, we can't build this project based on those parameters. Or they can say, yeah, and they can move on and develop the project. My understanding is that they actually encountered some of that when they developed the Holiday Inn Express project. So this is not unfamiliar territory to them. But that's how, my understanding of how that process would and will play out.
Okay.
And I think Mr. Mayor had an additional comment on that topic.
No, I simply would say one of the best ways to deal with the remediation of that town that's groundwater contamination is cap. I mean, so something on top of it, they're never going to be allowed to access anything, but no one else will. I mean, no one will ever be able to go down and grab the groundwater because of the contamination. But I mean, those are things exactly that DEP will set those standards, and we'll live within them.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Canada, one
I
additional
have
question.
another question about the parking on there. I just like surface parking. I think that we have too much surface parking in Pensacola. However, normally will the developer consider doing deck or garage type parking versus having any surface parking at all? And could that include the other businesses and everything at certain time periods where you just don't have an empty parking garage?
We're expecting them to take everything that, I don't know if Amy clearly said that in the thing, was we're expecting them to take up everything they need plus everything that they're displacing. In that there is a parking deck on there. There's going to be 5 stories, 243 spaces. It was in the plan, if you look at it on that east end. So there is a deck that's a part of it that was supposed to be taking care of those spaces.
Okay.
Right, and pardon me, and whether or not 243 spaces is sufficient will be a matter that will be determined during permitting, whether they meet the requirements for permitting and in their financing, because whoever finances the property is going to have some requirements for what their parking density has to be as well.
Okay. The other question is, south of that is the ferry, and of course we expect, eventually that to come back online, and you're just going to have a really robust area there. Traffic management, congestion management, have any of those things been considered on whether or not that will impact the ferry and the parking there, or the congestion area?
Mr. Vice President, Madam President.
Yes.
We think that all the needs for parking for the ferry and for the property can be addressed within the development plan. Reference was made about displacing, free public parking. I have to tell you that since those lots were designated for free public parking, they were quitclaim deeded to the port as part of the development agreements between the port and the CRA. And as you all know, the port is responsible for generating revenue to support its business activities. So I've never contemplated that those lots would be free for all forever, at least under the port's control of them. And I've mentioned to the mayor on more than one occasion, he's actually stopped me from turning them into paid parking, that's lost revenue source for the port to provide free public parking that we then have to maintain but don't generate any revenue off of. And so we think that all of the parking needs can be accommodated down there. Now, whether all of those needs continue to be free or not, I think is a determination to be made in the future. But for this project, They are required by the lease to provide the parking they need for their property, the parking they need for their existing property, and they're to honor all existing commitments for parking. So if they're, if they're building on top of 87 parking spaces, they've got to include retaining those 87 parking spaces within their development. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President? Vice President? I do want, and I do appreciate Amy reflecting her view, but I do want to reflect, at least it is the mayor's view, that was not going to be a paid lot. So I quickly want to head off anything before something happens on media or somewhere else. I'm glad Amy discussed that discussion that she and I have had before, and I said, it's, at least while I'm mayor, it's not going to be paid. So I don't know, maybe sometime down the road, if somebody else is in this chair, who knows? But that's not my intent.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, Ms. Myers, I see your hand.
Yeah, well, I haven't had a chance to read this very thoroughly at all. I will read it. It's hard to read with this and these on at the same time. But I do think that we should be looking at the highest and best use of that land, which I believe that this proposal does that. However, having said that, we do have a climate adaptation and mitigation strategic plan that was developed by our climate task force. So I've been down there and looked at the damage that Hurricane Sally did. It was pretty amazing that just literally lifted the asphalt up down to the gravel. I've never seen that before. So the question I'm concerned about, even though it is a much higher and valuable use of that property, how is it going to be built to address climate adaptation and also being environmentally friendly? So have any of those issues been addressed?
I think the best place to address that is the hotel due to the north that was built high enough that did not have impact. And I think if you look at the parking deck that is across from the one right here at Cedar and Main Street, I mean, yeah, water came in, water went out, the parking deck's still there. There's no material cause of what's happened with the parking deck. So I do think if we build to the proper standards, I don't think that should necessarily be a problem any more than we have existing buildings that were built to new standards and had no impact. So I think that would be the way I would see it. I mean, everything's going to have to be built high enough, just like the new Holiday Inn Express had to be built high enough, if you noticed, so that it didn't have any impact from Sally.
Mr. Vice President, Madam
Yeah, I'm
President,
sorry,
in
yes,
addition
ma'am.
to that, I think Councilwoman Myers, you probably are also referring to reduction of carbon footprint and all of those other things as well. And my understanding is that with the various flags of hotels and the various levels of properties from economy all the way up to luxury, depending on the brand, they have certain specific requirements for not only how those facilities are constructed, but how they're managed and operated based on that particular brand's environmental policies and environmental standards. Am I misstating that at all, Mike? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Since you mentioned flags, can we release at this point what flag this hotel will be flying, or?
If I might defer to Mr. Mangrum, who is representing the prospect.
All right, absolutely. Mr.
Mike
Mangrum.
Mangrum, I live at 215 West Romana, the broker at Coldwell Banker Commercial. They have intentionally not told us exactly which flag. As a matter of fact, I think they have several they're discussing with, and it would be not in their best interest right now to reveal to one another who they're talking to. And I think that this lease getting in place will be a catalyst. I think what's going to happen is you're going to have, nobody's been selling flags right now. The major hotels have been kind of at a standstill for the last 6 to 8 months. And I think you're going to see a real rush to court our developer to try to get their flag in here. So I think, you can imagine the top 4 or 5 chains, IHGs, Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt type properties, and they have a variety of brands that they all sell or that they franchise. Those will be the caliber that we're looking at. They've talked about it being a limited service hotel. I'll just throw this out because Hitesh, the gentleman that I speak with the most, has told me that although food service may be a part of what they do, they also respect the downtown restaurants, and they like to see their guests frequenting the local restaurants. So being close to Palafox was a part of their choice for this site instead of some of the other locations they could have gone to in town because of the walkability, because of the access to restaurants and other entertainment down there. So they may or may not have restaurants, so limited service is what they're talking, but that upper to mid-upper scale, higher than the Holiday Inn Express that's currently there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, there is a commitment to that standard level or higher than you're saying. Okay. All right. I have a question too. I don't see any speakers, so
My button is not working now. Apparently Sherry's now infected my
it's contagious.
So I do want to say, I very much appreciate, I've challenged Amy to go out and find non-traditional ways to earn revenue and generate things for the port. So I totally appreciate this coming forward. I think it fits in many different ways of what we're doing. I think of all the things that have been discussed, there is one that is, I think, out there that is going to have to be, this board's going to have to figure out where we go, what do we do? And the challenge is very much along the lines of as we began looking and discussing some of the things that we're talking about to our west in the Maritime Park. And the question as to what do we do? We did talk to the attorney at one time about as we dealt with those environments, dealing with some type of hotel moratorium. That was said it was ineligible to do. So again, we certainly had known there was some discussion with this group. Obviously, things went quiet during COVID, and they've come back up. But since that time, we have entered into agreement and assignment of a property at the Maritime Park that we are dealing with, and I think that's going to be the bigger challenge as we deal. I think that's something I think Amy also wants to know, what is the position of this board relative the things that we're doing right now on the Maritime Park, and where do we go with that, and how do we move forward? I tend to think certainly before COVID, I would have agreed there is definitely enough market for everyone. I'm not sure where we are in the days of COVID, but I would say at least it is comforting to know that an existing hotelier decides he's going to build another hotel in the same area. So that tells me something good is happening in Pensacola, and something that we're doing is working. So, I think that's going to be, that I think is the one question that I think this council does need to address, does need to determine. And I think there's no doubt that we have started that process of working with the individuals at the Maritime Park, and how do we deal with that versus the issues that are happening at the port. But I'm very appreciative of what Amy's done in bringing forward something that is non-traditional revenue at the port. Those are things I've challenged her to do, and I think this is one that in spite of this, what's been going on with COVID, we would have been very receptive, and I think needs to happen and move forward. I think that question though we still need to ask ourselves, where are we with that process, and where do we go with the Maritime Park process?
All right. We've had a speaker come in there, Ms. Kennedy Nguyen.
Yes, I just wanted to mention about what I had tried to research last year. And it was, I have this bold concept that it always gets kicked to the curb. And that is having a convention center here in Pensacola. The convention center. I just think our sister county to the west will probably have that convention center before we in Escambia County have it, because they're building that infrastructure to have a convention center. But I was always, and the number one thing, the top priority that says no to a convention center is that we do not have the capacity with hotels here in Escambia County to address a convention center. And that was the number one, it didn't matter who I talked to, the answer was our hotels. Hotels are, people want to stay in proximity. They want to be in proximity of where everything is. And to say that you can go out to 9 Mile Road on the interstate and everything does not address the convention idea. And so having more hotels, because I said that were already maxed out in there. So looking at the capacity for hotels and looking at what the yearly capacity is versus some of those ideas. And like I said, one of the number one things that I was told when trying to get a feel for a convention center was that Pensacola does not have the hotel capacity to address the needs of any major type convention of when you're talking about the 10,000 or more people type view. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kennedy Nguyen. I did want to say I do appreciate Ms. Miller, Mr. Merritt, you guys' graciousness to come back and obviously deviate from the existing policies. I think when we give the public and the opportunity to put air around these things, we certainly come back with better programs, better leases, better policies. And certainly, I think as you have a council and mayor on different sides of these negotiations, it always helps. It's tough to go negotiate a deal and then come get approval from people before you've had a chance to hear what they're looking for. So I think it's better, obviously, or it's better policy. But appreciate your graciousness to come back and do that. I did want to ask you, you'd said that this is basically a draft lease. With some of those terms in there, those things I'm assuming have had some kind of straw vote agreement to as far as base rents and those things.
Mr. Vice President, members of council, yes, when I say draft lease, what I mean is what we literally did was took the streamlined boats lease, which you all had substantial input into the final product of, and basically stripped out all of the particulars related to the streamlined deal in terms of rent, term, those kinds of things, and plugged in the particulars for this deal.
Okay.
So that's what I mean when I say it is truly a draft. There are some specifics related to this deal that do need to be addressed with legal in terms of the language on the environmental section and some of those other things. But we literally took the streamlined lease deal, stripped out their name, put in the name of this prospect, stripped out their rent, put in the rent structure for this prospect, and provided it to you as a draft. One of the problems we have, as you are aware, is under Florida statute, it's either 315.08 or 308.15, and I always get it backwards. Lease negotiations at seaports within the state of Florida are confidential until 30 days prior to consideration by the governing body. That means consideration for a vote. So by law, the earliest we could have brought any specific information to City Council or the public on this deal, if your meeting to consider the lease is November 12th, was October 12th. I believe, I don't know what the date of release of the workshop materials was, but you all got actually an initial notice back in September that gave you as much information as we are legally allowed to provide outside of that 30 days. So those timelines, unless and until the state statute is changed, make it really, really difficult for us to engage council and engage the public in any meaningful way, let more than 30 days before you consider taking action on the item. It's just really difficult.
I understand, for sure, and that's why I say I appreciate the opportunity to do it now. I think it's certainly less surprising to anyone who hears about it. If we're not considering a lease, we're talking about it. So it's certainly less official, so. Anyways, Ms. Hill?
I had just one other question, kind of a side question. That casino boat, former casino boat that was coming for repairs, I know he probably had to stop in Mississippi for a long time or on the river. Are they still coming for repairs?
Mr. Vice President, members of council, the Glory of Rome, as I understand it, is still located in Biola Battery, Alabama. It did suffer some damage as a result of Hurricane Sally, and they are, as are we, in the process of kind of regrouping. Right now, part of the site that they were considering is under use as a Hurricane Sally debris reduction site for the city of Pensacola, so it's not currently available, at least for the next several months anyway, so it does give us some time to resume discussions with them. But they are in kind of a reevaluation process, as are we, but we're still in contact with them on at least a weekly basis to see where they're at.
Thank you.
All right.
Chair.
Yes, Mayor.
I did just want to say, when you had a question about pricing, and I don't want to leave it all up to Amy, we certainly do have professional advice that we have. We have Justin Beck, if Justin would come up and address at least the issue of rent and market, I think that might be good to confirm. It's not just something that Ms. Miller came up with and created a number. The other thing, if you just to get your thoughts, Justin, on the market of the pricing, and then lastly, I did just want to say, again, it wasn't policy. But as far as I'm concerned, I've made the commitment to you, and I said, this is what we're going to do, and I told Amy, so this is the way we're going to bring it forward. We're going to bring it here where you have the chance to have the discussion. We have it in front of everybody. So, I mean, I made that very clear to Amy. That's the way we're going to do and how we're going to come forward. So we are expecting council rules to change, but until then, we're certainly, that's the commitment we've made to this group and to the citizens. So we're going to continue to do that. But Justin, I think just for your confirmation in making council at least feel better about there was some diligence as to some feel from market. You certainly are both a lessor and a lessee here, and just to get your thoughts on comparable rental rates.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. Justin Beck, 361 Woodbine Drive, broker for the port. And yes, we did. We spent significant time going through evaluation of the property. The nice thing about having an active and vibrant downtown is there are plenty of comparable sales to go off of, so there's a lot of good data there. And whenever we look at a ground lease, you're basically applying some sort of annual rate of return on that value of that property. So that's what we did. The city also has some ground leases that they've completed, so we were able to pull those similar sorts of returns. I don't have that data off the top of my head, but I can absolutely get it and circulate it, I'm sure. But yeah, we've definitely spent a significant amount of time advising the port and making recommendations. And it was a healthy negotiations between the city and the tenant. So several rounds back and forth on deal points. So I feel confident that the city's getting a value that is market and is fair to both sides.
Okay. Yeah, and I wasn't so much thinking the number was capricious or arbitrary. Just wanted to know as we're looking at it, and I'm considering it, and are these terms real terms that have kind of straw vote been agreed to by both sides? So that answers that question for sure. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Justin. I thought
Yeah.
it's always good when we pay for professional advice. I want to get your professional
Happy
advice.
to do it. If there's any other questions, happy to answer those too.
No, very good. Thank you, Mr. Beck. All right. I don't see any additional speakers. All right, Ms. Miller, you have any closing remarks?
Mr. Vice President, members of council, thank you for allowing us to present you with this brief overview. As you look through the lease in the next couple of days or week or so, if you have any specific comments, concerns, please feel free to pick up the phone and give me a call, and we can talk about them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We will move on then to the next item here. That's 20-00652, street lighting plan. I believe this is Ms. Myers' item. Ms. Myers, would you like to kick it off?
Yeah. Well, I've been trying to get street lighting in my district. Well, for the 11 years I've been on city council. And it's been very frustrating seeing other areas of the city that get a lot of money spent on street lighting. And yet our primary commercial core around Cordova Mall, that area, and Sacred Heart Hospital, is dangerously dark. And it has improved some, but it's still dangerous. If you just drive down Bayou Boulevard from 12th Avenue to 9th Avenue, it's pretty horrific. It's unconscionable. And neighborhoods that are dark, on Langley from Davis to Sanders Street, 42% of the lights on that street are paid for by private individuals. That's unconscionable. And the street is still dark. And so for those council members who weren't here when the city did this inventory here, I guess you all have a copy of it. Does anybody have a copy?
They were all, everyone got a copy.
Well, when that thing was being done, the council was not given detailed information about what was going to be in this inventory. For instance, we were not told that it did not include state roads. Well, state roads are very important. 9th Avenue, the longest street in Escambia and the city. A lot of people live on that street, from one end to the other. There are a lot of small businesses. There, from Creighton Road to Olive Road. They're neighborhoods, plus they're very dense apartment complexes, and some of them are in my district. One side of 9th Avenue is in District 2, the other one is in District 1, and District 5. There are almost every district is affected by 9th Avenue. But no street lights in large sections of 9th Avenue, and I see people walking across that I-10 bridge constantly, riding bicycles and walking. No sidewalks, no street lights. It's unbelievable. Now, what's unbelievable to me is that this is not worth, honestly, the paper it's been written on, but it doesn't include state roads. They got no input from city council members. Nobody asked me, where are the problem areas in your district? One of those problems areas is right in front of the Tryon Library. The crosswalk there, it's completely dark. So, with state roads, the city maintains about 1,400 lights on state roads, and we get reimbursed every year. And I think we actually make money. I think last year we got $380,000 back from FDOT for maintaining lights on state roads. So
Miss-
know a lot of citizens have a concern about this, and I've been doing a lot of research on it, on best practices. There's a concern about some of the LED lights being inappropriate in neighborhoods. So, they are appropriate on certain streets, but not in neighborhoods. So, we don't have an ordinance that addresses street lighting. A lot of cities do. And I sent you all this afternoon, for instance, the city of Chicago has a fabulous street lighting plan that addresses also the different type of lighting and the health effects, by the way. That city recognizes the health effects of LED lighting on health. So what I'd like to see is some type of, fairness, and that survey thing. There is a form. If you want a street light, you can fill out this form supposedly and get a petition from citizens for a street to either put in or remove a street light. That doesn't seem to me to be a very efficient way of putting in street lights.
Is that what you're hoping to come out of this discussion item, to have a better way then? Or I'm trying, so I hear the problem, and I'm on board with you with the problem, but I'm hoping we're about to turn a corner and get to a solution.
In a short period of time tonight, we're not going to really be able to get into this. But I think that I'm trying to find a way that we can have something immediately. When the mayor, 2 years ago, when we talked about this, and by the way, every year when we're asked, submit your budget request, I always put in their streetlights. One of the first things I talked to Mayor Robinson about was streetlights. And at that time, you mentioned each council person having $50,000.
Could you address that, Mr.
There are
Meyer?
some things that, so we talked about that the first year you were in office, each of us getting $50,000. Of course, we'd have to find that in the budget, which I believe we can find it. And then we were going to have meetings in January. We said, well, we'll get input from the public also, Well, that fell through because of COVID. But I don't think that has to stop us, because I think all of us know our districts very well and know where we need to start with addressing streetlights, safety. So I'm looking for a way that we can at least do something soon, because we can't have the workshops we wanted to have, but perhaps there's some way we could have input to the mayor to get this done in lieu of having, town hall meetings.
Yeah, Mayor Robinson?
And I think we did that during the budget. We put in the additional funding. As far as this thing, we threw that away last year. As far as I'm concerned, when we came to the 2018 budget, that piece of paper and all the stuff you had, we threw that out. We said, hey, we're going to do this. We did base it on, y'all, we're going to have this meeting, and it got canceled in January, and then by the time we got ready to reschedule it, in March and COVID, and we went all over. We've had a number of challenges with trying to figure out. But this year's budget, we came back to you with what Derek had, and we said we would have a number that was divisible by 7. And if y'all would give us places that you felt were places inside your district that fit within the budget you had, we would do it. Now, again, we would like to first try to find places that are not on state roads. Continue to let us advocate with DOT. We've gotten a number of lights placed on 9th Avenue with DOT, and at your request, we began talking to them about Bayou Boulevard. So we are trying to get both of those things placed in there. But again, our working with DOT is, again, they said, hey, if you work with us we can put in a couple of lights here and there on state roads, give us places that you directly have problems, and we've been doing that. And they have been responding and placing the lights in. As far as the money we have right now in the budget, we would like y'all to select places within your district that would work on city streets.
Okay.
We absolutely would love that to happen. Now, we've even gone a step further and created some things. I know Councilman Moore has brought this to our attention, the light. And so we have been working with that. And Kareth is not here, but Kareth has been working with, oh, there he is in the back. Kareth has been working with Gulf Power. There's like a 4,000, I don't know what it is, there's a 4,000 light that we had bought before, the prior administration bought it. We still have 73 of those. Our goal is to use that in more commercial, higher visibility settings. In residential, we want to go to a standard of a 3,000, whatever it is, light level. And I really appreciate Councilman Moore working with some constituents in his area that we're going to do that, and we were able to find that light with FP&L, Gulf Power, somehow or another in the prior administration, they weren't able to find it. We worked very diligently, worked with Gulf Power, found a light that we can put in that's 3,000. I think we still have a number of the 4,000s, and we're going to try to use those in more commercial settings. But we are absolutely ready to go out and deal with lighting. If y'all have lighting issues in your area, in residential parts, that we will put in the 3,000, whatever scale it is, light, and we will go do that. You each have in the last budget a portion. I don't know. I think it was. I don't believe it was the full 50,000, because there were some things that Derek needed within the lighting budget. So I think it was half of that. But get us now those things, and we'll work with Derek in each of 7 districts to work and make it happen. So we approved that in the budget, and we're ready to get it moving.
I do have one question, Ms. Myers, and I'll go back to you. I just want to make sure we resolve this issue before
Okay,
we
good.
move on. So my question, I hear you guys saying, it sounds like you're saying the responsibility of identifying where the streetlights go would fall to council people?
Well, if you have places, if you don't, we will work through it. I mean, but I was under the impression, y'all keep telling me you have dark places in your district. Derek is ready for you to tell him what those dark places are, and they will go out and evaluate the dark places. But every time I come here, a number of council members say, I know where this is in my district. We would love that. If you're in your district probably as much as anyone.
Sure.
If not, we could also I could get Derek to sit down with each of you and look in your district where he thinks they are, and then where you think it is based on your constituents, and we can find a way to make it happen. I mean, on Langley in front of the Tryon branch, okay? If that's where we need to put one, let's go out there and evaluate that spot and say if it works, let's put one there.
And so I guess what I'm asking, in a case like that, is that something that needs to come here as a legislative body, or is that a phone call to Derek and say, hey, I think
It's
our
a phone
network
call to
has a
Derek.
dark spot?
It's a phone call to Derek. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, when the budget, we allocated this portion. So as far as I'm concerned, it's with each of you trying to sit down with Derek and say,
And help identify.
where is it within my district that I need lighting help?
Okay, all right, I was just afraid we're saying it's incumbent upon us 7 to ensure, like.
No, but-
We don't have those qualifications to say, oh, well, now I'm an electrical engineer or a lighting engineer.
I want you to sit down with Derek, and you have places that you know. And so
Okay.
when you and I have our meeting, I'll have Derek at the next one, and we'll sit down and we'll say, where is it that we want to go?
Understood, thank you, Mayor. Ms. Myers.
Well, I'm glad to know that we have the money in the budget for that. I know that was one thing that we talked about at the budget workshop. I would like to know, if you're going to divide it up equally among districts. Or how does that work? But I do think that the council members, at least I feel like I know the lighting needs of my district from my own observation and from what my constituents are telling me. They want lights. I think that there's some areas that need LED because it's not going to impact anybody's bedroom. They're not going to be close, it won't impact their property or neighborhood. But it's a dark area that needs to be adequately illuminated if it's a crosswalk at an intersection like the Tryon Library. You would want it to be well lit, but
For sure.
I'm
And
certainly going to give Mr. Owens my list, and I think that, encourage other council members to do the same thing, and I certainly will continue to reach out to my constituents and ask them, I know some people would like to stop paying for a light, like people on Langley. If we can light up that street better, maybe people will feel that they don't have to pay for a light in their, in front of their house to feel safe.
all right, well, that sounds like a good solution to that. And I know we got capable, qualified staff here that can address these things in a measured, trained way, right? So it's not just about lighting it up. There's a way to illuminate the street, and they're going to understand all of those elements that go into it. So anyway, yes, Mayor Robinson.
Derek, could you come down here? What was I remember we talked about that because I asked you for a divisible number in the lighting request you had that we would be able to sit down with council members. So, I mean, we're more than happy to sit down with each member and see what we can find and then go evaluate what needs to happen in each area.
Mr. Chairman and members of council and Mr. Mayor, we would have to go back and look through the budget and see, I know we discussed that, and see exactly how that fell out. I know that we have $200,000 in the budget for energy and conservation measures, and we'd have to go back and look and see how that was divided out. I don't recall if we said it was going to be so much per district evenly amount, because some districts the need is different than other districts, as Councilwoman Myers stated. So we'd have to go back and look and see exactly what those numbers are.
All right. Okay. I was thinking we had some even amount in there. That's whatever it was that we have. I want to make sure it's even.
It very well may be, Mr. Mayor.
You can always move money around. I just wanted to throw that out.
That's true. That's what we do here, right? All right. Well, I don't see any more hands waving. I don't see any more likes. Thank you, Mr. Owens, for. I think we've covered that one there. All right, let's move to number 3 there, 20-00655, Community Maritime Park Parcel Proposals. And I am the sponsor on this one. So basically kind of in the same spirit of what we talked about there with the port leases. Opportunity for council to weigh in, that the mayor and staff administration, they go negotiate a lease and then they got to bring it back. I think it's just a fair way to do things, that they have a chance to understand what we might be looking for. Obviously, the subject property is paramount. It's extremely important. The voters of this city voted to develop those parcels. They voted for a plan of those parcels, and up till now, they've sat there undeveloped. Aside from the baseball field, which is great. So it's just we've been unable to get the full plan materialized. And so here we are in an unprecedented year, and we've got capable, qualified developers at the table. I just wanted to be sure that we didn't fumble. I'd like to have a discussion so that we can send the administration to do their negotiations and know kind of what boxes they need to check with us beforehand, so that we've increased our likelihood of succeeding in getting these parcels developed finally. So anyway, that's the spirit of it. I see we've got speakers already, so Ms. Canada Wynn, you have any questions?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave. I had already
Okay.
scheduled something, and so I just wanted to, I'm excited about the development of the Maritime Park parcels, but I'm also concerned with the fact that I'm not inclined to sell the properties, that they are sold to the developer. I think that that lends a whole wave of opportunities for the entire waterfront. We just talked about leasing on the waterfront one property, and now on the west side of, in property, we're gonna talk about selling. So my view is that I'm not inclined to sell it. When we did the amendment and the citizens voted for the property, one of the things that was most important to them was access and that type of thing in there. So that was one of the good things about it. So I was also concerned about that. I wanted to know what the waterfront plan said about that. I also wanted to know if that was a killer deal in reference to that. I mean, you can lease the property for a length of time, but are the developers looking for ownership as one of the carrots to developing the property? So I wanted to see that. I also wanted to get a view of the other properties, because we have other properties that are leased along the waterfront, and so they're leased, and so a decision to sell to one entity and not to sell to others, what type of impact that would be on our waterfront. And again, it brings some of the history of Pensacola with some other properties. Access was denied based on the ownership and all that type of thing. So those are the questions that I had.
Okay. Yes, Mayor Robinson.
I mean, I will say this, whether we lease the property or sell the property to the individual, a hotel can say, whether they buy or lease, they could say their pool is only for their guests. They have the ability to say those things. That's part of whenever you have the lease, whether you lease it or you buy it, you have the ability to say certain things on that limit the uses of what happens. Now, what you don't have the ability to do is impact any of the access that is around it. All of that, the walk on the water, the park in the middle, the parks on the end, the other things that are not associated with a lease, those are going to be public into perpetuity. Those will be accesses and the views, as well as the ability to access and walk through it is absolutely open to the public. So, I just want to, I say this all the time, I used to be at the county on the beach. Just because you have a lease doesn't mean you can go in that house or that anything else. People can deny you. A lease does not say it's open for you to go in. It's closed to the person who has the lease during the term they have the lease. So I just want to be, I want to be careful that we understand the terms of what we're saying public and what we're saying. Now the challenge is at some point it comes back to the city council. I mean, the case in this point was there was a 30-year original lease with 4 additional 10-year renewals that were the discretion of the lessee. So technically, in 70 years, it would come back to this council, and the council then could make decisions at that point. They could choose to re-renew, which has been the case always at Pensacola Beach. No one has ever not renewed a lease. Or it could be a number of different things. I just think we need to be honest with ourselves when we discuss what we're allowing to do. And just because you sell or lease it, it does not mean that the owner with a lease can't also have some exclusion. What is clear, though, is the public right-of-ways in there will always be public. In the waterfront, all that walkway around the whole thing on the waterfront is always public.
Mr. Chair, so
Yes,
while we're
ma'am.
being honest, if we have a policy that says that we do not sell on waterfront property, there is waterfront property along the waterfront that we have leases on. Once you begin to sell those properties off, then those other entities also will begin to sell want to purchase their properties. And we could look at it as an individual, and each case is an individual case, and each time it comes up, you'd be able to determine that. I just find it difficult to agree to one and not agree to another based on that. Also, I know that we had something here once about important circumstances, why we would do it and those types of things. So those are just some concerns that I have when you talk about it. And again, I have not heard whether the developers have a preference or not in reference to their development.
I think all of them have a preference. It's easier when you own it fee simple. So they all have that preference. That doesn't mean, Ms. Canawin, we can't bring it forward with a lease. Our intention was looking at potentially a lease with some kind of one-time opportunity if it was agreeable, because several of them have expressed it's a whole lot easier when you own it fee simple, but that does not mean, again, we can work through it. I think that's what, Councilman Moore wants us to get the ideas from you as to what it is. That will kind of help us figure out how we bring something back to you.
Thank you.
Can I ask you this? When was the ordinance on the disposition of property south of Bayfront, Maine? What year was that ordinance adopted? Do we know? Does anyone know? Yes, Ms. Wolf?
Vice President and council members, that ordinance was adopted in 2015.
2015, okay. Ms. Hill, I believe you've been,
Well, my point, I agree totally with what Councilwoman has said. Our waterfront is not for sale. We welcome development, we welcome leases, but it's got to stay within the city ownership, I think.
okay. All right, thank you, Ms. Hill. Ms. Myers?
Okay, this is the position I take, is that we cannot sell it. It has to be leased, and I'll tell you why. And I don't have the language of the referendum that was voted on, but this is basically what it said. At the time, the citizens voted. What they voted on was to adopt the master lease agreement and the master development agreement. So, in those two documents, those were the documents that the citizens voted to approve. Master lease agreement, that property is to be leased. And that's what the citizens voted for. And I take the position that you can't sell it. It has to be leased, because that's what the citizens voted to do with that property. And in that master lease agreement, it was supposed to have those, 8 parcels?
9 parcels, or 10 actually, yeah.
That were to be developed by private developers. So we've already got two that are leased, and so, we can provide them with lease terms that, should be adequate to cover their concerns about investing over there. So I don't see that, purchasing, leasing it should be a problem for a developer, but it would be a problem for us because the citizens voted to lease that land, not to sell it. So therefore, I think purchasing it is off the table.
Can you speak to that, Ms. Wolf? Is that, not to say that that's, you know,
Vice President, council members, no, I cannot speak to
Okay.
that particular issue. That just hasn't come to my attention before
Okay.
now. I'm making notes as we're speaking, as
Okay.
Councilwoman Myers was speaking, to look into that language. I can speak to the ordinances that are on the books right now, but I have not gone back to look at the referendum language.
okay, all right, yeah, I was writing notes too. I want to go back and look at that specifically as well. And that's what I wonder on the ordinance, what the spirit of what was to be achieved there. Certainly, we've got to preserve our waterfront. And as I look at parcels there, it just, it became it put me in a bit of a internal conflict. It's like, well, certainly we don't want to give up we don't want to sell our waterfront parcels, but when you think about it, if that property's leased, we've got leased property that we can't just go walk on right now. We can't access the waterfront there, and it's a lease. There's kind of these little nodes that are circled out, and does it change our access to the waterfront? If that's what the spirit of that ordinance is to preserve our waterfront access, is the public barred out from the public because it's not the waterfront directly that's there? So it creates a logical conflict for me there, in that if the hotel is a lease, you're welcome to access that parcel. You can still access the waterfront, but you can't access the parcel unless you're a patron of that hotel or that residential development, multifamily residential development. If it's a sale, same sort of access. So it becomes a little bit of a logical conflict there on what are we trying to preserve. But anyway, so I'd like to look at the spirit of that ordinance, and if legally we are bound to not be able to sell by the referendum, then it's a real simple discussion. That'd be a discussion killer. I don't know about a
Well,
deal killer.
I think that your point's well taken. You know, we have the right to regulate over there, but the only issue I'm raising is whether we sell or purchase. That's a separate issue than the ordinance. And I just take the position that, given the language of the referendum, I'm sure the clerk of our clerk can pull up for you, that it's my understanding that the voters were asked to basically approve the master development and the master lease agreement. And it's just my position that is what's binding.
Mr. Tahar.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, essentially we're talking about the same thing because, these developers, in order to get financing for these big projects like this, they're going to need a 70 or 100-year lease, and which is essentially fee simple. I mean, they're going to own the property essentially. Now, technically, we're going to sell it to them, but when you sign a lease of that length, then it's looked at to me as ownership. And so, 100 years from now, it may come up and we may renegotiate. But in order for anybody to do anything on this property, they're going to have controlling interest of that property for a very extended period of time. And so I'm not big in favor of selling it either, but when we sign a 100-year lease or a 70-year lease, I think it's the other one, we're essentially doing that. So I want to see them developed, and I want to make sure that these three proposals that we got are very interesting, and they're going to have to go out and get, obviously some pretty substantial financing to do these projects. So I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some stuff starting to move. I appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Tahar. Do we have any other comments?
Vice President Moore?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Wolf.
If I might, just because it's come up a couple of times.
Absolutely.
There are two ordinances that I've identified that I believe are pertinent to this particular issue. Section 2-3-4 is the one that's concerning disposition of property south of Bayfront and Main Streets, and that's the one that was adopted in 2015. The relevant language on that, just kind of summarizing it a little bit here, is concerning real property that's owned within the area that's specified. shall not be declared surplus or disposed of by sale of such property in the absence of any exigent circumstance expressly declared to exist by the city council. But then it goes on to allow a lease if that's what the city council desires to do. Additionally, there's the sensitive properties ordinance that was adopted just a couple of months ago in August, I believe it was. And the sensitive properties ordinance addresses real property within the city limits, states that it shall not be sold if any of the following characteristics applies. The property in question is adjacent to water or provides a water view. So it does not have to be immediately adjacent to the water. If it's a sensitive property, it lays out a procedure for consideration whereby the mayor and staff would make a reporting recommendation to council, and then the council would determine what action to take, whether to adopt the report and recommendation or to do something different from that. So those are the two ordinances that I believe would apply to this particular property. And then, as I said, I'll be more than happy to look into the question that Councilwoman Myers has raised concerning the referendum and the ballot language.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Attorney. All right, well, hopefully that, Mayor, gives you and your staff some information so you kind of understand where our brains are at as you go into to negotiate on these.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Well, we can move on then, if no further comments, to 4. That's 20-00654, the 2021 legislative priorities. I'm showing Council President Canada Wynn was the sponsor here, but Mayor Robinson or
That's going to be key.
Mr. Wilkins?
Mr. Vice President, every year we develop a list of priorities to take to the legislature, and those priorities fall into two categories. One is legislative requests, so things that we want in law, and the other is what we kind of typically think of, but is much less, is a legislative allocation of funds for a project. And the city of Pensacola has a very good reputation for using very good discretion and with our funding allocation requests. They're always very reasonable in amount and in importance to our community. So we really try to be careful when asking for money, particularly in a year like this year where state revenues are down and funding is going to be very tight. Issues that sort of continually crop up with regards to legislative requests, as an example, is the SHIP funding for housing, affordable housing, and the sweeping of the Housing Trust Fund continually each year, which means potentially $3 million a year to us for affordable housing. That fund every year is swept to some degree. This last year it was diverted 100%, so we got zero in SHIP funding this last year for affordable housing in Escambia County, and we share that with the county and the city to share it in our consolidated plan. So typically that's not the case, but last year it was. The governor originally funded 100%, and then with the COVID crisis, they swept all of the funds. So that's one reason why we have issues with affordable housing statewide, and why it's perpetually a request on our legislative requests to our delegation. Other issues and I provided I think y'all may have seen it, a very draft list of items that we would consider or are considering for this year. I can go through it one by one. You can ask me questions, but mainly what we would like to do is gain the council's thoughts on items for consideration, and then gain some concurrence on our priorities to take to the legislative delegation and then to the Florida League of Cities and to assist us, and then also to the legislature come March.
Mayor?
If I could just simply say, the number one, there's some here from last year's that we don't need. We obtained all the funding for the MRO the last year when the governor came and got us the funding for the remainder of what we had outstanding for the MRO. So, I mean, we don't need that anymore. But I do think the big one, I mean, certainly the sweeping of that, the contamination issues that we have, because we're forced to use the PFAS by the FAA, and yet find ourselves on the other side. It's just, we're in a bad position, and I don't think we should be held responsible in dealing with it. We currently test, we contain all of our tests. As I came on board, we changed our policy. We contain all of our tests. We don't spray anything on the ground. We dispose of it, but we are required to test. And right now, the only thing we can use, if something were to have a fire out there, we'd have to use that. And it's not necessarily, we're required by law, by federal law, to do it. The trust fund certainly is one that I think we can continue to do the cell tower one. I think they don't seem to want to act on that one. But I'm certainly happy keeping it moving forward. The big one, I think, is the scenic highway multi-use trail. There's the Sun Trails funding in that, and I think, I think we may have opportunity this year to get a push in that and begin to make some leeway and headway on that one. So I would hope that we could pursue that going forward. But again, those were some of the things that we were talking about this year. And we gave you last year's list, but no, it doesn't mean because it's on last year's, it ought to be on this year's or anything along those lines. We just simply, I think, gave that to you to have some area for you to think about things.
Food for thought, yes.
All right, thank you. Yes, Ms. Myers.
So you said this is food for thought. I'm really concerned that there's nothing, and I asked Mr. Crayer, did you get the email I sent you asking you for the council's list of street priorities, state road priorities?
I probably did.
Well, I'm trying to, Ninth Avenue was one of them. The mayor asked us for a list of state road priorities, and we gave it to you. And Ninth Avenue was on there, Cervantes Street. I don't think that West Main Street corridor was on there. But, we provided a list of these state roads. I think there were about 5 of them. And we need to go by what the council, we voted on those state roads. And, I would like to see some improvements, traffic calming on 9th Avenue, streetlights on 9th Avenue. And I'm advocating for all of 9th Avenue, not just that part that's in my district. I honestly, I have walked the whole length of 9th Avenue. And, some of it is in District 5. And if you recall, that having additional sidewalks in District 5 on 9th Avenue was an issue when you were on the city council before. I think you were instrumental, I'm talking to Councilman Gerald, and getting a lot of sidewalks put on 9th Avenue in District 5. And, we still need a lot of improvements on, and there are a lot of low-income people who live on 9th Avenue. And so before we go asking for money for roads, state roads, and I assume Main Street corridor is, we need to get the list out that we gave to Mayor Robinson. And you know, apply that list of priorities. So that's one concern I have.
Can I speak to that?
Uh-huh.
This was a project dealing with corridor improvements that we wish to make, certainly with what we were going to do, hopefully with stormwater, that we thought if we were able to get all those at one time, it would be worth us doing. And that's the reason we still ask that. It's not necessarily a state road. If you're going to go through state road, DOT would fight any particular project if we created our own funding project that was going to fit within their program. They're going to be expecting us to work that through the TPO process, and that's exactly what the things you're asking me on those different roads. This was dealing with a stormwater project that is not DOT's road, but one that we were asking for a funding issue that was going to help us move forward with what we were going to do on West Main related to road and infrastructure for that. So we were asking for a funding request. I'm not sure how, we weren't successful last year. I'm not sure how successful we are this year. But the roads you're talking about, we need to be pushing through the TPO program, and then we need to be pushing at DOT, which we have been. And I continue to work with Secretary Gaynor. Obviously, they've been a little preoccupied right now with the bridge, but we are working with them, and they have made progress on some of those roads that we've asked them to look at and make priorities. So I don't think that's necessarily a legislative list, because DOT is not gonna. They see that they're gonna fight for their money that they're gonna do, and then they have it in their programs, and they would be expecting us to push that program through the TPO and other things that we're doing and dealing with them, not to go directly to the legislature. And I'm just, Secretary Gaynor's told me that personally, and so that's why you don't see those roads in there. You do see us having conversations with District 3 DOT, and we continue to push that. But that's why you see those differences, what we're doing.
Well, you know, if we go through the TPO, that's pretty much dead in the water. There are things that FDOT can do, that they should do, that don't involve going through the DEP, whatever it is, TPO. I've been breathing through this mask too long. It's getting to me. Streetlights, for instance. They need to finish some sidewalks that they started and didn't complete. I mean, there are gaps in sidewalks. They put.
Are you saying you want this as a legislative, we want to send that?
Well, I'm just saying.
I know you mentioned these things
Maybe
before,
it
but we're
doesn't
talking
need
about
to
our
go through the
legislative priorities.
legislature, but it, you know, it's something that we certainly need to get FDOT to do. And if this is a stormwater project on West Main Street, well, it's not the only state road that floods. Gregory, the intersection of Gregory and 9th Avenue is pretty horrendous. But anyway, so I don't want us to just say, well, we're going to go through FDOT to address those priority roads, the TPO, I mean. And about the boundless playgrounds, do they really have money for boundless playgrounds?
Again, I think that's going to be one I don't think you would see us necessarily say we need to place going forward. And we did last year at your request. We put it on there, but I mean,
We've had that on the list for a couple of years, and I did remove it from the draft, my most recent version of the draft there. With regards to DOT and TPO, and I understand what you're saying about the TPO, I just spoke with Mr. Forte, and he feels like the best way to address those types of issues, sidewalks and streetlights, is through the safety office, DOT safety office, rather than through my words, rather than through a legislative request for funding.
Okay, safety office, and also, I think we need to look at safe route to school funds. But maybe Mr. Forte can help us at least, I'd like to know, well, how do we approach the safety office? What do we have to do?
Yes, ma'am, I think we can put that effort together separate from our legislative request. And Mr. Forte is still getting his feet under him here in the city, but he's excellent with those types of.
And as far as sidewalks, they're ADA violations. When you don't complete a sidewalk, that's an ADA violation. I mean, they put the truncated domes on each end of the block and a curb cut, but guess what? Did they run out of concrete to put the sidewalk in? So there is an ADA coordinator. Dean Perkins, I guess, I don't know if he's still the ADA coordinator there or not, but, I mean, FDOT has quite those types of ADA issues. I think if we brought it to their attention, they'd probably fix it.
Are those things, are you saying, Mr. Wilkins, Ms. Meyer should reach out to the safety office of FDOT?
I think it's a better route to go.
Okay.
rather than
We'll be happy to work through those, but I do think, I do highly encourage you, all those of you who are TPO members, bring that up at the TPO. I mean, you want more funding for sidewalks? Then as a TPO member, you need to be bringing that up to the TPO.
And if you're not on the TPO, you can speak at public, right? Because I know I've seen Ms. Myers down there speaking as a member of the city of Pensacola, as a resident, in the open forum at the TPO, so.
Well, I don't serve on the TPO because I want to be able to talk to TPO members.
And that's what I'm saying, though. I've seen you down there as a member of the TPO. I've seen you speak at open forum, so I know it's not easy to stop you. And you want to get a message across, you'll get it across, so. Sounds like there's plenty of opportunities there. Did you have anything else to add to the legislative priorities, Mr. Wilkins?
Just whatever the council would like to consider. This was our staff list. And you may not have the most recent version, but I'll run through it very quickly. There's and this is statewide application for the contamination that the mayor spoke about associated with airport facilities with using PFAS, the Housing Trust Fund, if we wanted to still include 5G small cell towers, requesting that they rescind the act from 2019. We do have to put in a Firefighters Relief and Pension Fund Act to memorialize our new collective bargaining unit agreement with fire. That's just administrative. Designation of Bayfront Parkway as a memorializing to our deceased, or to police officers killed in action, rather. One left over from last year was the tree protection under private property rights. I guess this was 2 years ago that we actually went to court against, and we prevailed in our individual case here, but statewide, it's really not effective. It's more of an arborist ethics act than it is a tree protection or allowance to be cut act. So we can carry that one through again this year. And then the pedestrian bicycle paths the mayor spoke about along Scenic Highway. That's kind of the list I have right now, not that it can't be revised.
Okay, very good. And I meant that as a compliment, Ms. Myers, about being tenacious. Ms. Hill, you had your hand up.
I was just wondering on number 11 on the attachment with the funding for Bruce Beach and the revitalizing housing. I was wondering how you saw those as similar.
That's not on the one I have, I'm sorry here. Specifically Bruce Beach?
Well, maybe you could read it. I know we don't have any plans for housing on Bruce Beach, so I was wondering how that would.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was a CRA request that I didn't enter.
Oh.
So I think CRA staff would
Maybe they
would be
could
best to ask
explain it
about
to
that.
us. Is there anyone that can?
I do think that one's going to have a hard time materializing. I mean, I just don't think, I think what Keith said is we try to be very judicious in what we ask for money. The only thing we asked for money on was something that is actually can be allocated by the legislature, which is those funds for the trail funds. That also goes to TPO, but it actually is allocated by the legislature. It's a very weird sort of anomaly. That's why we asked for it out of the legislature. Outside of that, we really didn't ask for any funding necessarily. We asked for positions in law that we thought were going to be beneficial to either giving us home rule control or allowing us to do certain things that was kind of at the core of what we were trying.
And Councilwoman Hill, the number 11 that you're referring to, and we can let Ms. Gibson respond in more detail, but I believe that was a carryover from last year also, that I wasn't sure if we wanted to continue this year or not.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I don't see any additional speakers.
Okay.
No-
What we'll do is start firming this up. Our legislative delegation is going to meet right after Thanksgiving, perhaps the 1st of December. At that point, we'll present our platform to them. We still have some time to, or at least one more council meeting, I guess, to make revisions if something comes up or if we need to make any adjustments at that time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilkins. All right, well, knowing we've got another meeting to get to, we've got a group back here that's winning some sort of patience award. We appreciate you hanging with us. We will adjourn and take literally to wear masks while in the building. If you wish to make a comment, please fill out a comment form, which you may obtain from CRA staff, who are seated here on the left of the cabin, or your right, or left, your, yep,
there.
here and here. And return it to staff to be called upon. If for members of the public who are remote, if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, please complete and submit a public input form, which can be accessed on the city website. And please note, there's a delay of about 1 minute between actions in council chambers and what you'll be seeing on the web via the public stream. Let's please start with roll call and / property disclosure. I'll start with myself, Jared Moore. I do not own any property within the community redevelopment area. Vice Chairperson Ann Hill.
I do own property in the area.
All right. Board Member Canada Wynn had to leave as previously announced, so she is not in attendance. Board Member Geralds.
I do not own property in the CRA district.
Board Member Myers.
I do not own property in the CRA district.
Board Member Terhar.
I do own property in the CRA.
And Board Member Wu.
I do not own property in the CRA area.
All right, so we have 6 present. That is obviously a quorum. And that will bring us to our first action item. That is item 2020-05, CRA resolution number 2020-05, CRA, approving the East Garden District Streetscape Project Master Redevelopment Agreement and preliminary plans. The recommendation is that the Community Redevelopment Agency adopt resolution number 2020-05 CRA, approving and authorizing a master redevelopment agreement between the CRA, the City of Pensacola, developers of the East Garden District Redevelopment Project, 41 North Jefferson Street, LLC, 2 North Palafox, LLC, and 90 East Garden Street, LLC, to award $1,375,000 towards the construction of streetscape improvements along Jefferson Street from Garden Street to Chase Street. Further, that the CRA approve the preliminary plans in substantially the form attached. Finally, that the CRA authorize the CRA chairperson to take all actions necessary to complete the project. A resolution of the Pensacola Community Redevelopment Agency relating to community redevelopment within the urban core community redevelopment area, providing findings, approving, and authorizing execution of a master redevelopment agreement between the agency, the City of Pensacola, Florida, 41 North Jefferson Street, LLC, 2 North Palafox, LLC, and 90 East Garden Street, LLC, providing for the redevelopment of certain property located in the redevelopment area, consisting of right-of-way, streetscape, and walkway improvements, and providing an effective date. That was a mouthful. All right. I don't know, I'm sure we have a presentation today. Director Gibson?
Yes.
I'm sorry, thank you, Ms. Denise. We need a motion in a second. I'm acting, I don't know what I'm doing here. All right. Ms. Gibson, are you okay if we move on? Is Ms.
If we have the motion in second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
All right.
All righty. Mr.
Yes.
Forte?
At this point, yes. Mr. David Forte, project manager, will introduce our developers.
All right, great.
Good
Thank
evening,
you.
Mr. President and Board Chambers members. David Forte. First time I've been able to sit up here and speak to you directly about a city project. I'm excited about it. I've spoken to you multiple times with TPO-related projects and other things in my time with Escambia County for several years. So I'm excited to be a member of the City of Pensacola, and this is one of the projects that Mr. Garrett Fiddler and Mr. Keith Wilkins immediately gave to me upon starting with the city, and I'm excited about it. So I want to go ahead and introduce to you Mr. Chad Henderson, Mr. Alex Stacy, and Mr. Tosh Filsinger with the developer group, and then we're going to come up here and give you a PowerPoint presentation, bring you up to speed, what's been going on over the past several months since the board allocated funds towards the project initially, and hopefully we'll be able to get some affirmative approval from the CRA board and subsequent from the city council, and we can try to produce this project, which will be very beneficial to our entire city of Pensacola and region. So with that, Mr. Henderson?
Hello, my name is Chad Henderson, 41 North Jefferson Street in Pensacola. Mr. Chairman and the council, thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here. It has been a very eventful 8 months since we last got together to speak about this project. And so, and despite 2020 continue to swing at us, we are here with as much passion and commitment about this project as we were back in February. So we've kept our heads down and made some progress, and that's what our hope is to walk you through that progress today via a very efficient PowerPoint presentation, but certainly to answer any questions and address any concerns about this project. And so maybe before diving in, a real quick kind of refresher of how we got to where we are today. When we think about this opportunity for this project as the East Garden District, it is one that we look through the lens of placemaking. And what that means is that we want to build on the vibrancy and the walkability of our downtown. It's just such a treasure to have that in our community, and it fostered a lot of growth and a lot of wonderful things. And so we were very careful to think about how we would put this together. And when doing so, really the first thing that we did was listen. And we listened to a lot of wonderful resources that we have here in Pensacola. We have listened to some like Civicon and the speakers that have come and talked about all the benefits of a vibrant downtown in pedestrian-friendly downtowns and walkability and vibrancy and connectivity. We listened to the Complete Streets Initiative that's been adopted by the city of Pensacola. We also learned from folks who have owned property in downtown through the 2014 flood and many other stakeholders in the area when we thought about this project. So when we came to you early on, we were a little bit further than schematic design of how this would come together. And since that time, we have gone through the process of going through design drawings and all the way into construction drawings, which are about now 95% or so. That last 5% would be an iteration that would be working with your staff to make sure that we are crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's with the second set of I's to making sure that we are doing the best that we can with this development. So if you wouldn't mind, I don't have a click. Next slide is fine. So we've done it with a local team. We do have a lot of stakeholders here that come at it from a different angle of subject matter expertise. We're very proud to utilize the local resources that we have used to this point. And again, learning from folks that have been here, that have experiences within downtown and within the community, and understand things that may have been hot buttons or where they have firsthand and they have seen some shortfalls in design and in quality work, and we wanted to make sure that we heard all of that as we put together this presentation. When I talk about this listening and thinking through, we had a Civicon speaker named Joe Riley from Charleston that said a commitment to quality means a lot and goes a long way. Tom Murphy, Pittsburgh mayor, said the power of a well thought out public-private partnership can really move the needle for downtowns and for cities. And so those are the things and the lenses that we looked through and we talked about when we talked about designing this project. Next slide, please, ma'am. So the master plan came together and all centered around this notion of a road diet. And what a road diet is or a street diet is simply we would love to narrow the road at Jefferson Street. And why would we want to do that? Because we want to take a street that is right now extremely comfortable for cars and very uncomfortable for people. We understand the importance of vehicular access and the ingress-egress for vehicles in downtown. But I think in this road we have forgot about the importance of the pedestrian and the walkability. And so the ability to take this and make it a much more pedestrian-friendly walk that would promote safety and promote connectivity to Palafox and other aspects of downtown is something that we were really keen on when we talked about how to move this forward around a street diet and a road diet. And so what was interesting though is that I think that a takeaway from my experience as a developer and someone who is really excited about investing money in downtown is that your staff members, because of a lot of the things that we've talked about, knew exactly what the road diet meant and why it's purposeful and what it meant for our downtown. So it was really exciting to have those meaningful conversations. Next slide, please, ma'am. So I mentioned the road diet, and I mentioned, kind of the quality of the design that we worked towards, but it was very much, it was about experience, it was about safety, it was about walkability and connectivity. So what we really wanted to do was to make sure that the development that goes on either side in and around the street diet is one that would be of mixed use and would be of ground floor activation. So we were activating ground floors. And when we're doing that, we want to do it in a manner where we're targeted and leasing in our casting. So it's not about just putting up buildings and hoping that somebody would come lease, or the first folks that would come along to lease it, but to curate it to where it is it's a mix of experience that create a sense of place, a place that we would all be proud of. When I travel, and I do quite a bit for my core business and work and development around it, I always say, I want to find a place where the locals go. Where do the locals go, and where do they meet, and where do they hang out, and where do you experience a little bit of flavor of your town or your city? And I think that if you create a place where the locals want to be, maybe a lot of other folks would want to be there too. And so that's something that we're really focused on doing. Next slide, please, ma'am. I mentioned Joe Raleigh and commitment to quality. So when we're talking about material components of the street diet, the various, whether it comes from landscape, hardscape, we want to make sure that we're doing things of quality of nature, so that it's all been put into this design. The Jerry Pate Design Company has really helped us, through this aspect of it. We wanted to use, plants and stuff that were indigenous to the area, that help promote, the Pensacola community, but do so in a manner that is extremely of high quality, and that's what we did, from a material perspective in our specs. Next slide, please, ma'am. So there was an element of this project, and is an element of this project that's along Garden Street. And so Garden Street and Chase Street are under FDOT jurisdiction, and as you know, Jefferson's under the city. So in working with various stakeholders to making sure that the alignment is there of this quality design and construction is extremely important. So very happy to let you know that since we have last seen you, we have obtained an FDOT permit for the Garden Street aspect of this development. That they were very, it was a lot of communication back and forth and collaborative. They really understood what we were trying to do, and they were very helpful in getting this permit through. So happy to report that we have got that permit in hand. Certainly interested in activating Garden Street along with Jefferson Street to bring back that connectivity and that walkability. What has been a little bit of an unactivated or a blighted block. We would really want to put it back and reactivate, especially those storefronts and ground floors. Next slide, please, ma'am. And then we talk about, the other, anchor uses along Jefferson Street, and we paid really heavy attention to the massing study to make sure that we understand how things are going to orient to the street, how we're going to create, again, this, walkability and this ground floor activation. One of the changes that we have made since we last presented the initial schematic design was this notion of an urban plaza, which at the beginning ran parallel to Jefferson Street and is now running perpendicular. We did that so when we do this parking deck, we can promote a lot of easy wayfinding that promotes safety and again, greater aspect of walkability to get folks from where they park to the street diet and the activation of the ground floors. Next slide, please, ma'am. I mentioned placemaking, and I mentioned the importance of how to appropriately curate the ground floor, meaning that we have these uses that really promote the local and regional flavor of our community and really offer up a great opportunity for human connectivity. I can tell you as a business owner and a person that tries to recruit folks to our community from other parts of the country, to have things like this where people can gather and they can experience, again, the local and regional flavor of whatever is on that ground floor, helps spur, a lot of things. And that human connectivity of ideas, fostering other entrepreneurship and other social gatherings that really promote our community forward is something that we had in mind when we talked about narrowing that street. So you can see in this diagram just how wide Jefferson Street is right now. And so thinking through how we would get the utilities down here, put the power underground for a much more pleasant experience, as well as utilize over 1,200 plants and shrubs and trees that would create kind of this nice pleasant walk and pedestrian-friendly and safe walk. Next slide, please, ma'am. We talked about the investment in Pensacola, and we believe that your gracious allocation of $1.375 million is certainly an investment alongside us, in that we will be able to generate many meaningful jobs, meaningful tax revenue that will ultimately pay for itself, we believe, fairly quickly in this allocation. So you can see our projections for property tax and bed tax, as well as sales tax. We think it's a pretty good investment for the city, not only from an economic perspective, but also from an experience perspective within downtown. And I think the next slide, I think that is, I believe, that's it. But we're open for questions, and I would love to answer any and all questions that you guys may have.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
Ms.
just have
Gibson.
a couple of comments. And that is, I did want to point out that project is essentially a component, or I would call it the last leg, the northernmost leg of the improvements to Jefferson Street that are identified in the 2010 plan. With the Southtown project, it kind of started in the middle, and CRA also did some work kind of in the middle of Jefferson Street to create that narrowing of the corridor and making it more walkable. With the hashtag project, that will address the southernmost piece of the corridor, and this project will address the northernmost piece. And the timing is excellent in terms of our moving forward and having the bond money, because it gives us an opportunity to leverage that money significantly. And so this really is a great partnership to achieve and implement another piece of that 2010 plan.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. All right, and I don't know if anyone's hitting their request to speak. It's not loading on my
Well, I don't
thing,
have
so
any.
you have to go old school on me. Yes, Ms. Myers.
Yeah, I don't have one of those, so. So what type of jobs, I'm reading this resolution, so what kind of jobs, in the resolution, it says the construction phase of the developer facilities and the project is expected to create local jobs stemming from construction-related activities. Well, that's a given if something's going to produce construction jobs, if something is built. And upon completion, the project is expected to create local jobs related to the operation of residential and commercial uses. So what type of jobs, permanent jobs, other than construction jobs, are going to be created from this project?
Yes, ma'am. So certainly, from a construction perspective, the resolution speaks towards the construction of the actual road diet and street diet. We have planned in our master plan more vertical construction as well as adaptive reuse development on existing buildings in the area. All of those uses would range from, the buildings range from ground floor commercial and or restaurants and such, cafes. We have we've slated for a coffee bar, a Papa's Pizza coming downtown, and others that would be permanent jobs in the restaurateur and entertainment business. In addition to that, an anchor use would be for a hotel that we have been working through, and we're already through our design drawings there. Well, really, all the way 100% schematic and conceptual, and now we're into our design drawings. That would be additional permanent jobs to run and operate that hotel, which we are slated for 167 rooms.
Okay, so basically retail type jobs.
Yes, ma'am. And I would add that, probably add to that as well. We do have a part of the project that fronts Palafox. It kind of backs into the Jefferson Street, about 40,000 square foot of office that we have currently owned, and we have put a large investment into those buildings, which are 2 North Palafox building, the old ISIS Theater, as well as the Rhodes building at 41 North Jefferson Street. We have upgraded and put a lot of money in the 4th floor of Jefferson Street for my business, Catalyst Healthcare Real Estate, which over the last 3 years has added about 15, 16 jobs to the area, very desirable jobs, as well as another organization called IRIS, which stands for Intelligent Retinal Imaging Systems, which is a healthcare technology company that I was proud to be a part of, that we relocated into the ISIS building. We took the theater and did what I believe a really nice job of upgrading that and bringing technology jobs downtown. So all of that builds on itself. As we like to say, activity breeds activity. It helps those companies recruit by having placemaking in mind around the offices and and access to eateries and restaurants and so forth.
So I drove around that block. It's basically a city block.
Yes, ma'am.
That's called the East Garden District, is a city block, basically, right?
Well, it would be half of the block from basically a block from Palafox to Jefferson, I'm sorry, so that block, and then we carry that over further east down Garden Street. Now, we don't own all the property all the way to Tarragona, but we would love for others to adopt, the notion of the branding of East Garden District and stuff.
Now, who came up with the brand East Garden District?
Myself and Mr. Tosh Belsinger, as well as Dowsal Architects, I always like to tie things back to roots and history and a bit of storytelling. So Elias Durnford in 1764 took the keys from the Spanish, who's a British general, and his background was being a surveyor, and he was charged with relaying out, Pensacola. And his vision was to, if you buy a parcel down on one of the big squares to the south, you were given a companion parcel, to grow your family garden on. And those gardens were linear, which created Garden Street, of course. And so tying that back to our history, and that's why we say it's 1764 and still growing, I think we have a wonderful opportunity and have done a great job and continue to do a great job to tell the story of Pensacola. And that was the thought process of branding in a manner that we could tie back to our rich history.
Well, I like the name of it, and I like, these individual districts because they have their own characteristics that I think, I've lived in bigger cities where, a lot of communities have these special districts that have their own characteristics, and so I do like the name of it. I was just wondering who came up with the idea to name it that. So 2 other questions I wanted to ask you. Who's going to pay to put the utilities underground?
So that is a part of the entire scope. So if we look at the scope, that's I believe a little over $2.2 million. That is a part of the design and the construction to take, the power underground. We've been working with Ruby Engineering and James Tatone that has really worked alongside of Gulf Power. Gulf Power has been very collaborative in the design of how to best get the power underground. So that is encompassing of the overall scope.
Okay, so just stop right there and hang in here with me just for a minute, okay? So this money that you're asking for, it's like a subsidy to, address those types of issues. So would this money go toward getting those utilities under the ground?
Yes, sir. So it's all within the right-of-way of getting all of the sanitary sewer, water, as well as the power underground, along with all of the street, curb,
Will that get rid
and
of
street
the
lighting.
telephone poles?
But, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Will that get rid of the telephone poles?
Yes, sir.
I was inclined not to support this. However, I do think the presence of telephone poles really distracts from a streetscape. I'm a big believer in downtown particularly, that we need to get rid of telephone poles as much as possible. So if this, like 2 million that you plan to do for this streetscape includes getting rid of those telephone poles, I think that's a great idea. So is that going to happen if we?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay, that would be the biggest incentive for me to support this, is getting rid of those telephone poles. But I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's one issue. The other issue is flooding. How are you going to address flooding there in that area?
So we do have
Drainage.
a part of the plan is done our best to be accretive to the overall stormwater approach to improving, downtown. So we've come up with these biostorm. So underneath all the planning, we were able to capture about the first half inch and create it with our landscaping and catch them and to add to catch. So we are accretive to the overall stormwater. Now, are we going to fix, all of downtown? And the answer to that is no, ma'am. But we have been very mindful of that, and also, some pervious, pavers in the parking areas. We looked at some of those ideas, but creating, very, mindful and green-oriented ways to do our best to help with the storm.
Well, let me just throw this out at you, because I'm going to support this, but we do have incentives that we offer developers to develop more green, like using pervious pavements for parking, for instance. And I noticed that you are using pavers. Those are high maintenance, but they do help attenuate stormwater. However, I do have a concern about rumble pavers, because they're not handicap accessible for wheelchairs and people with mobility impairment. So I'm just requesting that if you use pavers, that you make them as smooth as possible and not use the rumble pavers.
Absolutely. My name is Tosh Belsinger, 501 Plantation Hill Road. The use of the rumble pavers is really to tell cars that they're about to enter a pedestrian area. So they're really not used for pedestrian use. It's really, you'll notice in Southtown, when you go around the tree, you hit those pavers and it kind of tells you maybe I should slow down. So we're not using those rumble pavers in areas where pedestrians will be walking. We're actually using them to help calm traffic, to say you are entering a pedestrian zone.
Well, I really wish you a lot of luck with this. I hope it won't be luck. That's not a good word to use. But I'm really delighted to hear that this money will be used to go toward removing those horrible telephone poles and making that area more attractive. It definitely needs it.
Yes, ma'am. It's been definitely one of our goals, is that our hopeful is the outcome to this would be a bit of a blueprint or a white paper for others who are interested in investing in downtown and want to interact with yourselves and with other stakeholders, that hopefully a bit of what we're creating would be something to point to and said, we really liked how this turned out from a quality perspective. So that's certainly one of our goals.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Hill.
I just want to thank you for taking all the time that you have taken to consider the complete streets and sensitivity to nature and people's being able to move through that area. it's compact enough that it's going to have a lot of influence, and I know it'll be a good influence, and I wanted to just praise you for what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Means a lot. Appreciate it.
Outstanding. Any other comments from the board?
I just want to make a motion, amendment.
I'd like to say something if I could, Mr. President.
Okay, before we do any amendments, yeah, Dr. Wu, go ahead, sir.
I just wanted to tell these gentlemen how impressive what they have brought to us happens to be. It really, really looks very exciting. I want to commend them for the thought that they put in to the planning and the beauty of the product that they brought to us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree, and I thought I saw some of the other Civicon speakers' fingerprints in theirs. Wouldn't normally say it, I guess, but I think listening to you talk, you probably have the same view of the community and what you're doing to contribute there through the partnership. Joe Minicozy doing the math, looking at how this plays out on the tax side. So we invest the tax dollars and how that investment comes back. Chuck Marone, obviously, as Director Gibson gestured to earlier, there's an incremental development to what's happening there. So I think it's great. It hits, it's just good urbanism, and it makes sense. Thrilled to see it happen, and anyways, appreciate you guys being here tonight.
Thank you, sir.
What amendment were you looking to make?
Yeah, I want to propose a friendly amendment to this resolution. And
We've gotten a lot of positive comments. It's going to get better?
yeah.
All
So
right.
the amendment is very simple.
Okay.
I would like to amend the language in the resolution that refers to the chair of the agency as chairman. So I would like to use gender-neutral language there and just say the chair. Every place it says chairman, I would like for it to say chair.
Okay, I don't think there'll be any.
Gender neutral.
Sure, I don't think anyone's going to have any qualms with that proposal at all. I would accept that for sure, no problem at all. Enthusiastically accept it, so.
Thank you.
All right. So we've got a motion and a second, obviously a motion on the floor, friendly amendment to make that slight modification. Do we have any members from the public that would like to? Okay, all right. And also I want to point out, yes, we started out with a motion in a second, I believe.
For the friendly amendment.
Oh,
Mr.
friendly.
Mr. Gerald's made the second.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Dan Lundeman. I'm a property owner at 2426 North Palafox Street. I think you guys are doing a great job. I love it. What I've got a problem with is, correct me if I'm wrong, I was very involved with SCAPE. I was very involved with Bruce Beach. I think some of you know how involved with Bruce Beach I was. I've been involved with the hashtag. I've been involved with Civicon. I was one of the original members of Civicon to bring all this to the city. And I don't recall the East Garden District being on the radar screen. You know, I heard the Day Marina, I heard Bruce Beach, and I heard the hashtag. I did. And again, I think it's great. I do. I think this project is fantastic. My property will improve dramatically value-wise. But here's the problem. I heard Chad speak, talk to everybody. There are 4 property owners, actually 7, that are on the west side of this development on Palafox. My property butts up to his property, and I've got an ingress-egress easement on Jefferson Street. So I hear all this, and I think, okay, wow, this is going to be fantastic, but I'm going to have disruption. I don't know what the timing is on this. When is this going to happen? Are they going to pull the trigger tomorrow and start tearing up the street? Don't know. So here I am. I've been there for 33 years. 33 years. I was never called to the party on this. I had to invite myself. I asked for a meeting with Keith and the mayor. They got me going, and I got a meeting with Chad, and I got up to speed, but I thought, you know, this really upsets me. I have helped my city for 33 years. I've been involved in some pretty darn big projects and seen them through. Nothing like 40 million, don't get me wrong there, but I'm a little community guy. I pitch in and I help wherever I can. And so when I find out that there's a special meeting tonight about this, because I was all set to go for the urban core meeting tomorrow, and I got to come to this one just to make sure I don't wind up in a civil situation. And let me refresh your memories. Years ago, I had to fight to protect my little property on 2426 North Pensacola Street from my city and a developer. It cost me 12 grand, 3 years of my life, and I didn't do a lawsuit because I don't believe in them. But I got stuck in a situation where my city said, Dan, you got a civil situation. I said, well, I don't know why. Long story short, the city finally did an inspection on the building, 60 code violations, 9 of which they were cited for. The insurance company for the contractor said, what do we have to do to fix your building? But I didn't get any help from my city. I didn't get any help from anybody in planning. I didn't get any help from anybody. And so here I am, I'm worried that I'm going to wind up in a situation where we've got flooding, sandbags, everybody there's got sandbags. I've got a 3-inch drop from the back of my building to Jefferson Street to the sidewalk cut. 3 inches. So I worry about, okay, am I going to have to sit there and fight after this is done? Hey, you guys, you created a flooding problem. I don't know. I've never been invited to talk about any of this. I have no idea. I don't know what the garbage situation is going to be. I don't know what the sewer situation is going to be. I don't know what the utilities are going to be. And you're happy that the polls are going? Me too, but guess what? I don't know what that's going to cost me as a business owner to run my power underground. I don't know. I don't know anything. But we're all giddy and happy, and we're going to spend this tax money on a project that have a huge impact on me and some other property owners. And I'm really resentful. I'm disappointed in this CRA. I'm really disappointed. I'm disappointed in my city. And here I am. I'm confused. I love growth. I'm all for it. You won't see anybody else push for growth. But when you ignore the little guy, and I'm the little guy, I get upset. It makes me want to just say, to hell with this place, I quit. I don't want to be here anymore. So I just wanted to go on record that I'm voicing my concerns about what costs I'm going to have to incur because of this, and if I'm going to have any other problems. I don't want to be in another civil situation, but I can guarantee you this. I'm not going to let what happened to me before happen again. I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. That's all I got to say.
All right, Mr. Lindeman.
I'd like to address Mr. Lindeman.
Okay. All right, Ms. Myers.
Well, listen, I'm so glad you came down here tonight and expressed your thoughts. I was not going to support this for other reasons, some of which you've actually brought up. But I am concerned about the flooding. And it floods in a thunderstorm down there. It doesn't have to be a severe weather event. And so I do have that concern. And so I'd like to ask Ms. Gibson or somebody, or Mr. Forte, I guess, he's working on the project. Can you address some of Mr. Lindeman's concerns, because they're valid concerns that he has? I mean, I'm in the same boat you're in, Mr. Lindeman. Nobody ever tells me anything. That's why I have to make open record requests a lot. So can you address some of the issues that Mr. Lindeman has raised about how it's going to potentially impact his property? Is he going to have to pay for anything being put under the ground? Is it going to create any flooding issues and drainage issues that will impact his property? If it is, we can't have that.
Well, I'll defer to Mr.
Okay.
Henderson, but
All
regarding all permits must be pulled just as if it's any other roadway construction project. So they would have to go through all the permitting regulatory agencies and meet all the standards, the local standards, the state standards, federal standards, as if this was a city construction project that we were doing. So as far as the actual impacts maybe that could occur, I'll defer that to Mr. Henderson to speak to, because they're the ones developing the design plans.
From a perspective of the, from the stormwater, as you'll see, most of all of this property is already impervious. So there's not any addition, with the exception of up Chase Street, the grassy area. So we will have to account for that excess stormwater. So all of the design and the addition, again, is from adding more plants and more pervious pavers, as well as plants and shrubs. So we are only doing things that would be accretive to helping the stormwater situation. As it relates to Mr. Dan's concern about the power, there would be a transformer, the pole that's really set right behind it. We'd love to work with you to get that pole down, but and I apologize for not being more proactive. We did sit down and we talked through, and I would love to address any other thoughts and concerns, but through no excuses. I should have done a better job of reaching out to you, but we've gotten to the point now where we believe we have all of the design together. And now is the time to sit down, because before we weren't there yet, but now we're here, and we have everything out in front of us that is 90-95% drawn. But it's not too late to address concerns, and if we have to make changes, we'll certainly look at those, but certainly not to affect anybody of our neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. I want to have good neighbors. So I feel like what we're doing is a benefit to all our neighbors, but certainly want to be mindful of how it affects you personally, and happy to have a further discussion.
And again, my point for being here is, when I was on the Architectural Review Board, one of the things that really got me upset was that we'd have people finding out that the neighbors didn't know what was going on. So we made a little deal that anytime something came before us, we would ask the question, have you spoken to your neighbors? Do they know what's going on? So I would hope the CRA would implement that same thing. Have you spoken to the neighbors? Do they know what's going on? And if you haven't, you need to go talk to them. And again, I'll close in saying, we have a joke. Dave Schmidt and I have a joke about North Palafox. We're the no-go zone. Everything's south of Garden Street, so-go. And now we've got the East Garden District popping up, and here we are, the redheaded stepchildren of downtown Pensacola, the no-go zone. Palafox still floods. The Martin Luther King Memorial Plaza, to me, is an embarrassment. It is an embarrassment. So when I see $1.375 million going to one block behind me, and I see 3 blocks of North Palafox Street that haven't had a darn thing done to them since the Martin Luther King Plaza got put in, I just ask myself, why are we not finishing that kind of activity? And why aren't we listening to all these people from Civicon? And why aren't we doing what they suggested? Hey, you've already got this strip going, finish it. But no, we got the no-go zone.
Listen, I agree with you 100%. And in the future, we need to make sure that adjacent property owners and people in a general district are well informed of what's going on. But I raise this issue often about what I feel like is the inequities in how we spend money on the CRA, and I was going to vote against this for just the reasons you're stating. But when I look at the benefit of this project and this investment, I think that it is worth the investment we're getting ready to make, because we're actually leveraging other people's money also, and I think it's something that needs to be done. I would like to see a lot of utilities put underground in the downtown area. I don't care how much money we put into downtown, as long as we have ugly telephone poles, we're going to look ugly.
No, I love the project. Again, I want to reemphasize that. I would be a fool to say that's not good. I just looked at the way things get done around here. Well, and I need to know, when is this going to start? Anybody have a timeline? What can I expect?
In the year 2020, we're all love to know when anything's going to start and
So
have any
this
sort of
all up in the air.
certainty.
Nobody knows, this streetscape's not gonna happen until the construction starts? How does this work?
Mr. Belsinger.
Yes, well, it'll all start with this agreement that we're working on with the city. And so if this agreement is passed tonight, it'll be then voted on by city council on Thursday. When that happens, I think we have the okay to execute the agreement by the developer and the city and the CRA, which are the three parties at the table, which means we're probably in, what we're hoping is that over the next 30, 60 days, we're finalizing our plans with our design, having conversations with our stakeholders if we get this approved. And then what we will do is submit those to the city, probably a 30 to 60 day permit process. So we're thinking that potentially, like maybe late Q1 2021, we could
And we're
start.
talking Jefferson Street, the
Yes.
streetscape.
Yes.
So this is gonna go in prior to the hotel and the restaurants and everything else. So there's gonna be an empty lot over there with the streetscape, and all the construction's gonna come later.
Yeah.
What's the timeframe on that?
Well, a lot of that will, I mean, various projects, I mean, right now with COVID, the financing opportunities for
So we're gonna
hotels.
spend 1.3, I just want, I gotta get this straight, 1.375 million to fix the street with nothing there.
Well, that's
And
not
the
true.
rest is to come.
That's not true. There is certainly, if you're speaking only to the hotel, then I can tell you that.
No, you've got, I know it's down on the southern part, I got that, but I'm talking about the vast majority.
Yeah, so even through COVID, we have continued through design, from schematics, we're 100% schematics hotels, we're in the midst of design drawings, and we're moving it forward. Now, does COVID throw a little bit of headwinds in the debt capital markets for hospitality? Sure, and I can't predict when those will come back, but I can tell you that the commitment to the project is there. And so, I mean, but we do have to, and I don't want to make any promises that I can't fulfill, but we are looking to move this forward expeditiously. Yes, and the streetscape would go first, and right behind it, we'll be very mindful of our construction management plan, not to hurt anything that we've done to come in from the north side of Chase to be able to do the work there for that.
Thank you, Mr.
So again, see, I don't get the impression, again, this is just the way a simple man thinks, that you don't build this, you don't put the carpet in the house before the house is done. You put the
Okay.
carpet in last. I gotta go.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lindeman.
I'd like to call the question.
Yeah, and we have a motion we have a motion on the question. I'll motion, or, yeah, do we need a second?
Have a second.
All right, perfect.
We need to vote on the friendly amendment.
Didn't we vote on the friendly amendment?
That's what I was asking. That's what I was asking about. Was it a motion and a second for the friendly amendment?
Yes, I second the.
Yeah, I thought it was a friendly amendment, so we didn't need
We don't need to
a
vote on it.
Yeah, we don't need a vote on the friendly amendment. So, I think the best thing we could do at this point is go ahead and vote on this. Mr. Gerald, I see your light just pinged on.
Well, actually, Mr. President, I had a question,
Okay.
and I was wondering if the comments made by the people that are making the proposal, would they be able to respond to the gentleman's questions prior to Thursday or by the Thursday meeting at some point? Because I'm convinced that he needs to be in the loop. Sure.
Yeah, and while we're talking Civicon speakers, I think there's one tonight that talks about a responsive government, and I know that there's the point she makes about not getting in between neighbors as the government. So we might ought to go home tonight and stream what Ms. Lemmy's speaking about tonight. But I think we've got a project there. We've had the discussion, and certainly I know where I'm sitting for years now. Years ago, I sat on the planning board, and we're talking about thickening the activity along Palafox. How do we get pedestrians beyond just Palafox? How do we thicken that activity? We've got to start creating pedestrian infrastructure on Jefferson, on Balin, Spring, widening it out, and we had some of those developments. So Mr. Studer comes with Southtown. He goes in, we get our first Wooner, and he was certainly generous with that and came for a license to use. He didn't ask for a vacation. He didn't need any money. don't think that would be fair to ask everyone to be that generous to say, hey, we need to go ahead and, he maintains it. We're making, so we have this nice urbanism, this good walkable corridor, these pedestrian infrastructure. It's incremental. It's right in the plan with what we're doing. There's some developers with money in hand ready to do developments that goes right along with what we're doing. It's in the plan, but I think it's incremental, right, in the process. What question are we wanting them to answer there, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I do want to point out, and I think Mr. Forte and Ms. D'Angelo did a good job of doing a fairly broad public notification regarding this project, opened up and invited citizen input. There was notification sent out to the adjacent property owners, which is our standard. So before you have it's kind of difficult, as Mr. Henderson stated, the project is not gone forth as of yet. It's not finalized. We're still in the development phase, and this is the time when you do make people aware. We had a very extensive public presentation workshop back in February. This is not the first that we have notified or invited the public to become aware of this project and to consider this project. So I think that, combined with the notification that was gone out already, certainly goes a long way to ensure that stakeholders, adjacent property owners, are aware of the project. And we have given, and we did get comments from the community, including Mr. Lindeman, prior to today's meeting. We got 3. Those were the ones that were interested in submitting. So, and those were provided to every board member as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. President, I would like to point out that Mr. Lindeman did submit a written comment
That's a good point, yeah. Thank you.
on the 12th of this month. So it's not like he didn't know about this. I think his complaint was he didn't know that, he didn't feel like he had adequate notice about the special meeting, but he did have notice about the project because he's commented on it. And we have those comments.
Yes, you're right. That's a good point. Thank you. All right, let's please vote on this item. Dr. Wu?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, Ms. Myers, is your...
Yes.
Okay. Is it unanimous?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right, unanimous, 6-0. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, and then we have,
Hey, will you announce that you're, oh, we got that policy, yeah. Sorry, everyone, I have to go, I have a previous engagement, so I'm already late. But, I appreciate it.
Thanks for sticking around for the vote, man.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And if I may, I just do want to say, unfortunately, the gentlemen are leaving, because of the considerable presentation made tonight, it is not at this point expected that when this item comes back before you all with your council hats on, that there will be another presentation unless you guys so desire. We do expect that on Thursday, one or more of the gentlemen representing the developers will be present to ask questions if you have any, but it would be it's going to be a parallel item, and we don't anticipate that there will be a repeat of this presentation.
Okay. That seems logical. All right, well, what a slurry of things today. All right. Discussion items. That brings us to item 2 here, 20-00647, Community Maritime day dock emergency water taxi. Service. Staff, Ms. Gibson, would you please provide
Mr.
us with an
Chairman,
overview?
yes. Mr. Forte is here to give us an update on the status of that item, which is also one of the projects that the CRA did approve funding from the 2019 bond issue.
Thank you. Mr. Forte.
All right, try to keep this, oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, we need a motion. No, we don't, it's a discussion item. I don't think we need a motion in a second. I'm sorry, Mr. Forte,
I'll try to
please
be as
proceed.
brief as possible. So yes, as Ms. Gibson said, this body has seen the overall Community Maritime Park day dock marina concept, the 48 slip day marina. We are working through the design at this point. We've received our core and our DEP permits. We anticipate having a public workshop for that project before we near our 60% design and get too far down the path before you start making significant changes potentially. Here very soon, now that City Hall is reopened, we're hoping to hold that probably sometime before the Thanksgiving holiday, the week or two before. So you should see that coming out pretty soon. But separate to that, following obviously the incident with the 3 Mile Bridge and the Hurricane Sally, we staff, we're kind of just roundtable ideas of how we could potentially offer some more transportation services for our citizens, especially knowing that it's going to be several months before we potentially have our connection from Gulf Breeze to Pensacola through the 3 Mile Bridge. And one was, how can we maybe work with the existing design that we've got? We spoke with our regulatory agency counterparts, and we believe that we have put together an idea. And actually, it's not, I wouldn't say it's an idea anymore, because we've actually proceeded with procuring the services for, I think you hopefully got the attachments in your backup, your agenda item. There should be a concept and then also the vendor that we've solicited to actually produce the floating dock. So over the next probably 3 weeks, if not less, Marine Technologies, who was encumbered via contract a little over a week ago, will be producing and delivering us a floating dock structure that will be delivered on site. And then we're working to bring a local contractor, a local marine contractor on to go ahead in advance of that delivery, install the pilings that would be needed, and actually to install the entire structure in place. So within a day or two, or maybe, depends on what day the delivery occurs. Within a week of the delivery, we should have an operational floating dock structure at this Community Maritime Park on the southwest corner where that breakwater is existing. And the intent is for our private charter boat captains, we've reached out and spoken to several of them, are interested in providing a private water taxi service, at least temporarily, until such time our 3 Mile Bridge is back open and we have traffic going back and forth again. A neat aspect of this as well is made it clear that we don't want to expend the money and not have some type of reuse of it. So when we worked with our engineer record, BDI is in the background, I should have recognized them earlier. I'm sorry, BDI with Mr. Michael Langston and Mr. Jason Frick with BDI are behind me if you have any technical questions, was we don't want to try to waste any dollars and obviously infrastructure. So they put together a package of a reusable floating dock structure. So if it were to be that we decide not to use it at this site in perpetuity, we could potentially find another site along the waterfront to actually install this dock structure. So that's really neat. Just wanted to give you kind of just an update of where we're at. You should see, like I said, hopefully a press release soon for the public workshop for the overall Maritime Park day dock site. But just wanted to make sure you were kept abreast of where we were, that obviously these dollars are coming from CRA funds. So.
Thank you. Ms. Hill.
The one question I have from other people is people take people across the water, where do they go? I know we keep hearing Gulf Breeze has problems. Can they go to private docks, or do you have that kind of plan worked out too?
Yeah, it could be, so I don't want to necessarily make mention of some of the charter captains that we've spoken to because they've expressed interest, but I don't want to speak for them at this point. But yes, it could be at their specific actual marina. It could be at public marinas like Shoreline and Gulf Breeze or others. Obviously, we're looking at those, 40 to 60 foot deep sea fishing charter type, that can probably accommodate, 8, 10, 12 people. Obviously, you would have to get yourself to the site. You can park at the Maritime parking lot if you need to. You can then jump on the vessel and you're ready to go to Gulf Breeze. But then, it's just another way to try to provide a transportation service for those that are struggling right now to get back and forth for the next several months. And then, like I said, the reuse of the site is really, of the structure is something that really is neat and something that we can either incorporate into the full project, or we could potentially look at, reusing that and moving it elsewhere and having another waterfront access point, so.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Ms. Myers?
Yes. Well, I think it's a great idea. I love the idea, and but I am looking, and I hope you can maybe look at what I'm looking at. I don't know if you can or not. I guess it's the PowerPoint with this discussion item. I sure wish council could see it. It's on, well, you can see it. Okay, but you can't see it. The ramp. This ramp is not ADA accessible. It does not comply with the Florida Building Code. And the issue is this. When you have a ramp, the handrail, this has to have a handrail because of the length of the ramp.
There will be railing on the actual dock structure and as well.
It has to go, when you get to a clear landing place, that railing has to go at minimal 12 inches beyond the ramp. When you get to the level landing, you have to be able, the reason that is a requirement is because a person with a mobility impairment has to be able to get their balance when they let go of a ramp railing. And so it's in the Florida Building Code. I had copied it out to bring to council tonight and left it. Sorry about that. But so that concerns me about that ramp that's in the picture.
Would you like to hear from the representative of BDI to see if?
Yes, ma'am. Mike Langston with Baskerville Donovan. Let me say that the ramp is fully ADA compliant. The shop drawings we have just approved have an 18-inch extension from the top of the ramp to the pedestrian pathway at the top, and an 18-inch extension at the terminus point onto the floating dock. And there's railing around the sides to keep people on the floating dock so that they don't fall off.
Okay, fantastic.
So this picture,
Good job.
the picture that I think you're seeing then is not the picture of the actual unit. It's just a representative.
No, sir. We had to go through several iterations to get Marina Technologies to put together a package for us to make sure that we had the criteria in there. And they did a very good job, and they were very responsive to the needs here. They moved forward with the project with the production of the actual gangway. It is ADA compliant, and we ensure that they provide those railing and ramping and stuff that meets the requirements.
Phenomenal.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
And I should have stated that from the onset. I apologize. That was it. There's no action. Just wanted to bring you up to speed.
Presentation.
Let
Great.
you know where to go.
Thank you, Mr. Forte.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too, man. All right. Seeing no additional speakers, this meeting is adjourned.